Okay, so went over epinephrine, glucagon, kind of insulin, glycemic index, whatever. But let's go over one more hormone, our favorite hormone, stress hormone, cortisol. This is our stress hormone. And since a majority of Americans are stressed at all times, this is an appropriate subject to go over, an appropriate hormone to talk about. Now, your body releases cortisol when you're stressed. Your body doesn't really know what's causing the stress. All it knows is it's stress, so it releases cortisol. So whenever you're stressed, you can bet someone has a really high level of cortisol. Cortisol, now, let's see, we'll go back to the caveman times, whatever, and they didn't really stress about life and cell phones and electrical bills and whatnot. They stressed, whenever the body was stressed, it was because they were running from a lion, most likely. So going back to all the evolution, you're stressed because of intense exercise, or you're stressing your cardiovascular system. So you're running from a lion. Now, when you're stressed, when you're running from a lion, what do you need? You need energy to run faster. So cortisol increases your energy. Just like adrenaline, which also releases adrenaline if you're running from a lion. But cortisol increases energy level, and you do this by increasing blood glucose. Just like epinephrine. So when you're stressed, you release more energy because your body thinks when you're stressed, you need more energy because you're stressed. And this energy will help you overcome the stress, mainly because of, I gotta shut this text up. Mainly because your body thinks it's stressed, mainly because you need energy. I don't know if I just made sense right now. But your body releases glucose. How does it do this? Just like insulin, it increases glycogenolysis, the rate that you break down blood glucose, or breaking down blood glucose, or glycogen, sorry. So you raise your blood glucose. It increases gluconeogenesis. Now, the thing about cortisol is it can also increase protein breakdown. Well, actually, that arrow should not be right there. That arrow should be right there. Remember, gluconeogenesis is the formation of glucose from non-glucose substrates, so fat and protein. So it'll do anything it can to increase protein. Because remember, your body is stressed, you're running from a lion, whatever, you need energy, so it breaks down protein if it needs to. Now, cortisol can be good and it can be bad. It can be good because it gives you more energy, but it can be bad because, well, no, it breaks down protein if it's long enough. But we'll also talk about something else, how it causes weight gain. So cortisol can either be good or bad. It can be acute or chronic. Acute release of cortisol would be like resistance exercise or running from a lion, for example. So in resistance exercise, it'll increase your blood glucose, and you will get energy and you will accomplish exercise. So this would be like resistance exercise, like lifting something. But it would be like resistance exercise. Chronic will be like a 2+ hour, and okay, I did that backwards, endurance event. So like running for 3 hours would be chronic cortisol because you're releasing cortisol for a while. It will be like stress. Not physical stress. Physical stress would be resistance and endurance. It would be stress as in emotional stress. Stressing about bills, stressing about a girlfriend, stressing about work, stressing about something. Remember, your body perceives that as stress, so you release cortisol. So in this instance, it's good because you're raising your blood sugar because you actually need blood sugar in order to respond to the acute demand of exercise, resistance, whatever. Also 40-minute exercise. Now, chronic. Now, in this instance, it's still good because you still need energy and resistance exercise, but since it's so chronic, you start breaking down proteins, which is bad. But the real chronic stress is this. When you really don't need energy, you're just stressed about life. Now, remember, your body perceives it as you being stressed that you need energy. So you release cortisol. Cortisol increases your blood glucose, so you raise your glucose. Raise your glucose level. Now, what happens in the body when you really don't need energy because you're just stressed. What happens in the body when you have an abundance of something but you don't really need it? Your body turns into fat, correct? So you have a lot of glucose already, You really don't need glucose or energy, but you're stressed, so your body releases cortisol. Cortisol will increase your glucose level even more. Since you don't need that glucose, your body turns this into fat. Turns it into fat. Because your body doesn't know better. So it turns into fat. This is why actually when people say, well, maybe you shouldn't be so stressed, it's easier if you're not, like if you're trying to lose weight, you're exercising, you're dieting, whatever, you're controlling your nutrition, yet you're not really losing weight. Well, maybe you should think about relaxing, taking a deep breath, calming down, and not stressing, because stress actually does cause weight gain, and it causes you to not want to lose weight and hold on to the weight, because you release more glucose, you store more fat. You don't need glucose, it'll turn to fat. So stress actually does help. So if you can't lose weight, chill out, take a deep breath, enjoy life, whatever. After this test, of course, but just calm out, because cortisol does increase fat loss. Now remember, cortisol is released from the adrenal cortex. That's easy because cortisol, cortex, easy to remember. Let's see. Yeah, so cortisol increases all this breakdown and everything. Now, another thing about after you exercise, going back to the glycemic index and why you need glucose right after you exercise. After you exercise, now your cells normally absorb glucose via insulin, but after you exercise, your cells have this receptor called GLUT4, which is closer to the cell. So this receptor is closer to the surface of the cell. When it's close to the surface of the cell, it is more susceptible to absorb glucose. So absorb glucose better right after exercise. So you have all this GLUT4 receptors closer to the surface of the cell. So if they're closer to the surface of the cell, you'll absorb glucose better. But after like 30, 45 minutes or so, these receptors go back into the cell, or to the inwards of the cell. So you just lost your chance of absorbing it. I mean, you can still absorb glucose, obviously, but you've lost a chance to absorb it more readily. Now, he repeats himself on a lot of these questions, and I really don't want to make 60,000 videos. So I'm going to try to finish everything about these hormones in 3 more videos. So just talking about cortisol. So the next video, I'll just talk about how exercise affects all of these hormones. Ready, set, go.